All right, should be live, and we'll do the usual test just to make sure everything's functioning properly and such. All right, should be, there we go. We're in business. So comments. Yuck. Idiots. Anyway, obnoxious idiots. All right, so John Reynolds says, my point about the single double slit is not that the pattern changes because there's a new impediment in the way. The dark bands actually disappear. So this argument that you can transition between one slit and two slits in some sort of way that allows you to see how it transitions. Frankly, I haven't seen that experiment done in any way, in any kind of with any kind of precision. So yeah, it'd be an interesting experiment to do if you could have adjustable sides or an adjustable middle impediment. You know, the middle thing. If you could make it fatter and thinner, that would be an interesting experiment to see how the changes take place. You know, closing the slit all the way versus opening it. Um, but though I'm certain those changes will be obviously gradual. They will transition from one thing to another thing. And there's a cause for that. And I pointed out what the cause is that these are active material circumstances where there's force between objects when you bring them in proximity to each other. Even gravity starts to affect the two objects. So, you know, it's there's plenty of room for a rational explanation for why the pattern changes. You don't need to jump to the silly explanation of Heisenberg and Huygens. Totally unproven, undemonstrated, unseen events in physics. You know, and that's what you're defending. You're just saying our God theory is right because evolution doesn't have a missing link. That's how shallow and empty your argument is. All right. And I already pointed out all the other reasons why Suskind's presentation of the experiment was wrong, inaccurate, and a distortion. And a distortion conveniently orchestrated to defend his nonsense, not a distortion for expedience or for concise. No, for propaganda purposes. All right. The dark bands actually disappear when one of the two slits is covered, says you. There's videos on YouTube. No, there aren't. Okay, that show this in real time. No, there aren't. Okay, post the link. Oh, but that's fake CGI NASA bullshit. So I've never even suggested any CGI fake NASA bullshit. Never even made a hint of any conspiracies, any deliberate effort. My argument is these fuckers are ignorant of the subject. They haven't really studied the single slit or the double slit experiment. They've just done what their instructors did to them, right? They're just doing to their students exactly what their instructors did to them. They've told them little fairy stories, okay, of what took place that never took place, experiments that were never conducted. That's what's taken place here, and you're just defending that, you piece of fucking shit. So again, no such thing. I've never made one fucking accusation about any conspiracy theory, any faked evidence, except for the fact that Piro presented a piece of evidence that clearly wasn't a controlled experiment. Clearly, the putting high frequency water waves that already have distortion in them into the slits would clearly be in the description of a fake experiment, one that's not demonstrating interference. When you put interference into the single slit, of course you get interference out. Duh. All right. The ball Earth lies. That ball Earth lies. I don't even know what that fucking means, but you're blocked. Yeah, fuck you. I mean, there's no reason to ever do this crap. Oh, but that's fake CGI NASA bullshit. You can't find one quote of mine where I've ever suggested a fake conspiracy. Somebody deliberately faked something. I haven't made one fucking accusation like that. What I've said is they're ignorant motherfuckers. They haven't studied their science. They're not disciplined scientists. They jump to conclusions way too fast. They jump the fucking evidence. That's what I've said. Why don't you quote that? Oh, but they've jumped the fucking evidence again, haven't they? Isn't that what they keep doing? You fucking lying cunt. All right, so here's his link, right? Okay. Video I've already watched more than once. Okay, it's one of the old MIT videos. And, you know, they're not bad videos. I like some of them, but they again have things in them that the guy doesn't go to any trouble to explain exactly why he did certain things. Okay, so in this case, they're bouncing a laser beam for no good reason through two mirrors. Okay, bending it this way, bending it this way, then bending it through a lens. So absolutely no reason to do that, right? Logically, you could just say you get rid of two of those mirrors. It'd be probably a good idea. But anyway, and then it goes through a lens. And the lens is basically for the purpose of expanding the beam. So it's not really a horrible distortion, but clearly you're taking a tiny laser beam light and you're making it bigger so it covers more area. So that's what this big lens is for. So it creates a big laser dot, which you see in the image. Now, they have two slit experiments superimposed on each other. So he has two razor blades that move in and out. And then in front of the razor blades, he has a diffraction gradient. Gradient? Yeah, whatever you're supposed to call it. The things that have lots of little lines in it, very close together. And it creates a distinctive pattern of dots. Okay. So in this argument, he's saying that somehow this demonstrates how you can how you can transition from a single slit experiment to a double slit experiment, when clearly that isn't what you're going to be able to do with this experiment. And I can point out exactly why the logic is silly here, because that's not what you're going to be able to do. All right, so we'll just play some of this. I guess sound couldn't hurt. We'll play along anyway.
Jaws, we don't have much light. And so, but I hope you can still see.
So he has the razor blades as close as he can make them, which creates the widest bars in the pattern. So now the bars are really big. So the first bar is filling the whole picture there. You can't see it very well, but you see the middle little thing above that's actually the central maxima. And you can barely see that there's other minimas. So, but you can barely see them. So when the slit is narrower, the pattern is wider. That's the single slit rule. So that's what the laser beam is imposing on the circumstance. That's what it's creating in terms of the diffraction. And so now as he widens the beam, he's sort of arguing that now he's going to be hitting more of those little lines. Well, he's already hitting those little lines in some respects, because this beam is already spreading. And we aren't told how close the gradient is to the razor blades. But clearly the light diffracts immediately exiting the laser beam, the razor blades, and it's exiting at a very high angle. So it's already, in my opinion, obscuring the image of the other bars, but it doesn't really matter. We'll get to the
single slit diffraction pattern. Now, on the screen, we have the circles. The circles are the 5 centimeter markers, and the little arrow tips.
So you can see that it's 5 centimeters is what the central maxima is. So he has the two razor blades so close together, the central maxima is 5 centimeters. And it's essentially the brightest point of this laser beam light, essentially. So keep an eye on the essence. We're talking about the brightest point. You can see there's a little tiny brightest spot right in the middle, as there should be.
As you can see,
and watch the little bright spot get brighter
of the central lobe of the single slit diffraction pattern associated with the 50 micron or so.
Maybe I'll make this a little bigger. Don't think that'll hurt anything.
Split on this Ronchi ruling. So now what I'm going to...
So he calls it a Ronchi ruling, which, you know, geez. Anyway, so now he's going to make it wider. As he makes it wider, the pattern narrows. The maxima will get smaller. The minimas will start showing up. And as he goes wider and wider, there'll be a point where there'll be the absolute maximum number of little bars you'll see from the single slit producing it. To understand, that's what the single slit is doing. That's what the two razor blades are going to do, regardless of the Ronchi ruler.
I'm going now to separate the jaws to admit one more, the second slit.
So he says it's a second slit. Now, it's obviously not a second slit. I mean, the razor blade is now opening wider, and now it's created all of these bars. That's the pattern from the razor blade still. That isn't the pattern being created by the Ronchi ruler. The Ronchi ruler isn't creating this pattern. The single slit is producing this pattern.
Now,
I mean, he should pull the ruler out. He should just remove the Ronchi ruler. And so then you could see exactly what pattern the single slit is producing itself, and then see how the Ronchi ruler is affecting that. But that's not how we did the experiment, for whatever reason.
Those of you who understand this theory will quickly verify that indeed you'll see three lobes then, three lobes within the single slit principal lobe.
And again, those lobes are themselves little bars inside of those lobes. You just can't see them, can't resolve them. But that's what's actually inside of those little things. So this is still you're not seeing the true double slit pattern because you're not seeing the bars inside of those. And what you're really just doing is seeing what the envelope of the single slit is still being imposed on the Ronchi ruler.
Now I'm going to add one more slit by again opening up the jaws.
So again, he says add a slit, and again, these markings are tiny little lines. So we're talking about something that has 200 lines per inch. So just understand how very close these little lines are to each other, incredibly close to each other. And he thinks he's adding one more. He's not adding one more.
As I bring in one more slit, now we have three slits, and look at the pattern now.
So we still have the single slit at a width that creates pattern. So let's understand the single slit is still shooting a pattern at the Ronchi ruler. There's no denying the fact that the single slit is creating the pattern that's being shot at the line thing. And the line thing isn't doing anything much yet, because until you open the single slit wide enough and contract, which contracts the single slit pattern. So as you're contracting the single slits pattern, you're going to be expanding the Ronchi ruler pattern. And these two events are happening at the same time. So this doesn't demonstrate anything, except yes, you can overlap two experiments on each other, but that's all it demonstrates.
It generates some weaker lobes in between, and the lobes themselves are getting narrower.
Now, what was really happening is the light, the contrast is going to change. And what you're going to end up with is a brighter, and brighter spot. So they're going to become more and more consolidated. So nothing's going to actually become the little bits you see that bleed into each other here. They're still going to be there. It's just the center dots are going to get so much brighter that the camera, the iris on the camera, is going to adjust. So as he's doing this, technically he's letting in twice as much light, then twice as much light, then twice as much. He's adding a lot of extra light. And you'll see that the pattern's not getting incredibly brighter because the camera's adjusting to the intensity of the little dots. And so as the little dots in the center get brighter, the ability to see the fuzzy bits is removed because the camera's iris shrinks. So the camera is less sensitive to the faint light because it's going to adjust to the brightness of the little dots as they get more and more narrow, more and more precise. But it doesn't mean that that fringe still isn't there. The fringe is still there. You just don't see it in comparison to the brightness of the dot. And you can see that in this image in the sense that the image you'll see, it doesn't get any, you don't see that anything gets brighter and brighter and brighter because the camera keeps adjusting to the brightness of the dots.
Now we'll add one more. Here it is 4. And here it is 5.
So this is his claim, and he's already probably more than, you know, he's probably at a millimeter now. All right. So a millimeter, how many millimeters in an inch? So he's way over 5 that would be exposed, especially when you consider that the light is being diverged by the slit. Now, as he makes this slit wider, it's diverged less and less and less, but still diverged substantially. Okay, at say 1 millimeter, it's still doing some diverging.
6, 7. And
again, he has no reason. He has no way of saying 6, 7, 8. He has no idea how many lines he has exposed as he separates the two razor blades. No idea. And you really can't tell. As you'll see, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, there's very little difference. The dots will be always in the same position because the dot position is established by the Ronchi ruler and the frequency of the light. So if I make more lines per square inch, I'll create dots that are further apart. And if I make fewer lines, I'll have dots that are closer together. So the only thing that's going to be controlling where those dots are the lines on the Ronchi ruler.
So on. I'm just going to keep enlarging the spacing, and you can see that.
So you can see that none of the dots are changing their position.
First of all, that the principal 3 lobes get narrower and narrower.
Right. So the only thing that happens is the dots get more and more precise because the dots are getting brighter and brighter, and the camera. See, this image isn't any lighter or brighter than the previous images, and obviously he's letting in a lot more light, not like 4 times as much, 5 times, 10 times as much more light is coming through now than the earlier image, and yet the image isn't any brighter. Clearly, the auto exposure is on the camera.
And then you get a lot more little side lobes in between. So as I widen the spacing between the jaws, you can...
yes, as he widens it wider and wider, they get more and more looking like a dot. No, but we can't really see their shape very well. They're kind of a square dot. But like I said, we don't get a very good image.
See that those 3 lobes will get narrower and narrower.
So now the width is irrelevant. So now he's just winding it, and it doesn't matter anymore because he's taken essentially the razor blades are wide enough now where they're having no effect. They're doing absolutely nothing. And the Ronchi ruler is completely dictating the pattern.
From these other side lobes also, there's little dots to the side. Now, the intensity is so bright that it's saturating our cameras.
So he's conceding the point. The camera is auto adjusting, and you know, changing what you're going to be able to see.
So what we'd like to do is to take a little close up so we can resolve the lobe. So if you can go in and take a close look at the...
See, now he's got the razor blade so wide that the razor blades are now creating no pattern at all. So they're not creating any, because that pattern got narrower, 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 and now it's just in that center dot. That's where the entire pattern from the two razor blades is now in that center dot. And all this really is you can see how wide the laser is, which is the three middle dots. They're so bright merely because that's what the laser is producing. That's the light that goes straight through the single slit.
Three lobes in the center. Here we are.
So not terribly helpful. And you can see that there is bleed in these three center ones and a lot less bleed in the little ones. But so again, this doesn't prove anything. This doesn't demonstrate that somehow where it was dark becomes light. There's no evidence of something that was dark becoming light or something that was light becoming dark. No evidence of that in this. And certainly the assumption that he could control how many lines he was being exposed when he turns the razor blades open, is just bogus. He could have at least taken the Ronchi ruler and moved it in front of, when the slit was very narrow, the razor blades were very close. He could have taken the Ronchi ruler and just moved it side to side to see if it matters whether the line's right in the middle or whether the line's not middle. It didn't even do that to demonstrate that there's some effect, that the Ronchi ruler was actually relevant when a tiny bit of light was going through, and it wasn't. All right, so that's probably enough. The rest of it's
go back
just
again.
A redo of something.
When I had only two slits.
So again, he's saying there's two slits. There's no two slits. He's saying he's only exposing two of those very tiny lines. So 200 lines per inch. He's saying he knows he just exposed two of those little bars, two slits worth. So there's one line and the edge of the other two lines. And he's saying that's exactly all I've exposed is 3 lines. And he's saying he somehow knows that when there's no way he could know that. And he's not even checking the alignment. Like I said, at least he could do is move the Ronchi ruler to demonstrate that this pattern has something to do with those lines, because these positions would change as he moved that Ronchi ruler, but he didn't do that.
I've added the third, the fourth, fifth, and so on as you can.
Yes, says you. So just bold talk. See, this is where the pattern, you can start to see the bars. There's many of the bars. You can start to see the bars now. And those bars are a consequence of the single slit. This is where the single slit pattern is now contracting. And as it contracts, you get more and more bars. So it goes from a wide thing. And as it contracts, all the bars that were out here and out here, way out here, all those bars contract. And you start to see them when you've contracted them to some perfect distance. So at some perfect distance, the single slit pattern, you see the most bars, where you could maybe see 20 or 30 bars. And that's at one position. And then to see, you can't really see more, because if you make it wider, the bars contract too much. And now you can't see the distinction between the bars because the bars are contracting. And then if you widen the slit, then you expand the bars. No, the other way around. As you narrow the slit, then you expand the bars. And as you expand them, they fade. They get weaker and weaker. So there's one point where you see the most bars. All right, so there's no absolute to it. There's a certain amount of play you have, and then the experiment's over. So you go a certain width, and the single slit experiment's over. You don't see any effect at all. So you go a little bit too wide, no pattern. You go too narrow, you see nothing but one big blob.
You see the width of the 3 principal lobes are getting narrower and narrower.
So once he gets to this point, has the single slit has completely contracted as a pattern. So the single slit is now no longer diverging the light. It's not doing it anymore, and all the light's just going straight through.
Now I have
except for the fact that the laser has been expanded, causing some divergence. I mean, another thing he should have done was have both of these removed and showed what the laser beam by itself looks like on the wall. And no, but he didn't do that either.
Lots of slits now.
So the other one is
and
just...
Again, the intensity is high, so I can't really tell how narrow, but I know it looks...
All right, so the rest of it is just the next experiment he does. He just puts different versions of... He puts a 200, then 500, then 1,000 lines per inch, and just shows how the dots get further apart the more lines there are. So the more lines there are, the further apart the little dots get. But that's all that really changes. All right, so enough of that. Let's see what comments there are by these assholes. So same old bullshit. I mean, fuck you. What the fuck are you even talking about? I'm clearly pointing out how putting a single slit in front of another slit experiment and then saying that proves something seems a little bit idiotic. That's what I'm talking about, asshole. Of course it's the ruler, for fuck's sake. So again, of course it is. Of course it is how? The pattern is obviously being created. The light is being diffracted by the single slit. That the single slit is what's making the light go to all these locations. You idiot. Yeah, you fucking idiot. All right, why the fuck would he do that? You wouldn't get the dark bands then. So again, this has nothing to do with your contention that if I have a single slit and I have a single slit, and I can move those two slits into proximity to each other, all right, by some mechanism. You know, just have them with separate laser beams each and move the two slits closer and closer and closer. That your argument is that we won't see how the patterns change. And my argument will be, yes, we will see how it changes. And my argument is going to be is it's going to change based on this material in the middle, which is going to be the one that is going to be the most charge sensitive, the one that's going to be the most influenced by the fact that these two slits are being moved towards each other. That's the material that's changing its thickness, just like Newton's glass. I said it before. Why do you think glass changes? When it's certain thickness, it's 16% reflective. Then I just take a little bit off and it's 0%. And then I take a little more off and it goes to 16 again. And I take a little more off, it goes back to 0 again. Why do you think that fucking happens, cunt? Shit, you're so fucking stupid. Well, guess what? It's the same reason and it has nothing to do with any quantum mechanic woo. All right. The diffraction bands would be much dimmer relative to the middle beam. Okay, you wouldn't get the dark bands then. Why the fuck would he do that? You wouldn't get the dark bands then. I'm sorry. The pattern is exactly what you'd get if you just if you move the slits all together and just did the Ronchi ruler. This is what you're going to get. And so you're just putting a distorted, you're just distorting the light going into the experiment and then saying it's no problem when it's a problem. All right, so not true doesn't mean anything. I mean, if you really think that works, like somehow this is so real time or something that you can just say something like not true. Fuck you. Now I see why you say nobody's shown you the evidence. Anytime someone does, you deny it. So again, he's saying I'm denying the evidence when I'm pointing out how this is evidence of absolutely nothing. You haven't demonstrated anything with this silly experiment. He didn't do what I said, which is move the parts so we could see. Like I said, if you're going to claim that he exposed just 3 lines, okay, that somehow he knew exactly where the center line was, and somehow the razor blades were lined up just perfect on the Ronchi ruler. So we're talking about 200 lines per inch, you know, a tiny bit of adjustment difference. And this line isn't in the center and you have an opening in the center, which changes the experiment, right? You'd agree that whether this is the center or this is the center makes a difference, right? Whether there's an empty space as the center or not the empty space when you only have 3, right? Makes a huge difference, right? So why couldn't he just show that by just moving the Ronchi ruler and showing how, look how the pattern completely changes? Didn't do that, did he? No. So anyway. All right. So, but I've had enough of your accusations. So you're done. Again, I think I'll block you in the comments section just to see if that works. But fuck you. I've never made any accusation of a deliberate, willful fake. I've argued that I know these guys, some of these guys know this shit is nonsense. I mean, Professor Lewin knows what radio jamming is. So when he talks about the radar experiment and pretends he doesn't know what jamming a radio signal is, that's pretty stupid. That's pretty deceptive to think that there's no viable explanation. So when Susskind is sitting there telling you how, well, you could do some strangled thinking about coming up with some kind of material reason why something changes. Yeah, no, it doesn't take a strain, especially when you consider things like the photoelectric effect, right? So we know that when photons hit a piece of steel or other metal, that it creates a current. Well, what do you think happens when it hits some kind of opaque piece of plastic? Could you imagine that maybe it creates charge then? It can't create a current because the charge can't move. But the location that the photon hit, charge could have been created. Do you have any evidence that doesn't happen? That's not possible? No, you don't have any evidence. Cunt. Fucking asshole. Translate to English. That's pretty funny. No, fuck off, John. Lying John. Piece of fucking pus. Anyway. So again, I didn't deny anything here. I deny that as you move this pattern from 0 slits to what he claims to be 2 slits, that's preposterous. So you can see why, you know, this is kind of a silly way to set up the experiment, in my opinion, to put in 2 mirrors and then get to the laser and not even show us what the beam looks like as it's projected by itself. All right, so this is the part where he transitions from, who's not showing up? Yeah, here it is. All right, from 1, so he says so they're saying, basically he's saying it's a single slit now. So somehow he's shooting he's got the razor blades as narrow as the openings between the 200 per inch diffraction gradient. So the 200 lines per inch, so that's a tiny, I don't even know how small that is. That's a 1/10 of a millimeter, something like that at best. Tiny, tiny, tiny opening. So he says right now he has the razor blade so close to each other that it's 1/10 or 100th of a millimeter, because it's just going through one pair of the lines. So he basically has 2 single slit experiments lined up with each other. That's his argument. And now he's going to open the laser blade and therefore expose 2 more lines. Just 2 more. Yeah. I say that's bullshit. You can see how many times he's turned it here. He's turning it and turning it, turning it, turning it, turning it, turning it. It's almost a full turn to get there. So I don't know what a full turn would be, but I bet you a full turn is a lot more than 1/10 of a millimeter. So now he's saying this is the double slit pattern, when clearly it's the single slit pattern going through a couple of the lines on the Ronchi ruler. But that's all it is. And again, he could demonstrate the difference by just removing the Ronchi ruler and just show us, yes, see, it's the ruler that's doing it. You know, but he didn't do that. All right. Enough said. I think that's enough said. So, fuck you. Fuck you. Yeah, that's the fuck you button. Fuck you and your crap link. All right. I don't know who this Sage Bias guy is, but I'm just telling you, I'm going to delete both your comments. And if you post with this icon again, fuck you. Okay, I'll just block you. Because I don't know what it's about. I don't know whether you're some Nazi racist fucker or what the game is, but I'm not really going to tolerate it. So fuck you, racist cunt, Nazi shit fucker. Whatever the fuck your game is. Fuck you. Why is the quantized deflection not visible when there's only one slit? Of course it is when there's one slit, so you're a fucking idiot. The single slit pattern. So you see, I mean, this is how dumb these people are. They'll sit there and have this conversation and input like, you know, like first, like they've paid attention to any of the videos I've made where I've drawn this over and over and over again, you know, literally 100 times, been over it and over it. But the single slit, when it's at its widest, not its widest, some middle point. Okay, so I'll show the three things: the middle point and then the narrowest. So when it's at its narrowest, the pattern is has the least interest, and it's the least amount of light. So it's at its lowest resolution. And then it's when it's at a middle point, some perfect little middle spot, the pattern has tons of little quantized on and off bars. Again, not consistent with the math. The math says there's supposed to be this smooth gradation between light and dark, very smooth. Nothing smooth about the pattern. The bars are pretty clearly bars. There's clearly on and there's off. There isn't any of this kind of on off and then kind of on off on. No, and that's what it's supposed to be doing. And then when the bars are at its widest, everything's contracted to one little blob in the middle, essentially. So there's the single slit over here. Well, over here it is, actually. So that's what the slit's the narrowest. Very weak pattern, very little light, very dim. And the pattern is the bars are the widest. So there would be lots of bars, but the light is so dim you can't see any of them. Then when you move it to a perfect middle location, then the bars are numerous, lots of bars, evenly spaced, quantized in their spacing. And then when you have the slit the widest, you just end up with all those bars from this middle part, just end up getting compressed into that middle dot. That's the single slit, shithead. Susskind drew it wrong. He didn't draw it accurately, so you don't see. That's what I mean. People say this crap is expedient. No, it's for the purpose of keeping people ignorant, fooling them, making them think the truth is different. All right, you say that changes in the plates with the slits, the surfaces. What I say is single surface creates this pattern. That's the truth. This is a surface phenomenon. It has absolutely nothing to do with slits. It has nothing to do with openings. It has to do with exposure to surfaces. That's the rational, deducible fact. You will create on-off patterns with a single surface. That's a truth. Shitheads. What does that say to you? Don't you understand that if a single surface can do it, that this is really about surfaces? Shit. Okay, with the slits on them affects the distribution. Okay, you say that changes of the plates, whatever the plates are, with the slits on them. Okay, so you could say a glass slide with slits on it, maybe. But obviously in this example, razor blades were used, affects the distribution. So I don't even know what to say to that. You say that changes of the plates with the slits on them affects the distribution. I say that how far away the surfaces are from each other. So if you use a needle, you know, a thin needle or a fat needle, you'll get a different pattern. I mean, it'll still be on, off, but the separation between the bars will change. Just as you change the frequency of the light, you'll change also where the bars are, you know, monochromatic light. So the proximity of the slits to each other, how close they are, affects the pattern. So if they're far apart this way, it affects it. And then if they're this way, how far apart they are affects the pattern. That's what I say, shithead. All right, this sounds testable. When I did the double slit experiment with slits, was surrounded by plastic. Oh. To do the two slit experiment in the real way, you have to do it with really precise stuff because you're trying to get the double pattern. You're trying to get the double slit pattern, the single slit pattern, as an envelope for the double slit bars. So you're trying to see both sets. You're trying to see the bars created by the single slit, that is the big bar and then the little maximas, and the little bars in between. So if you don't use a pretty good slit, you won't get enough resolution to be able to see the bars inside the bars. All right. You could do this with slits in a piece of copper or a material with various charges across the surface. Yes, it would be really interesting. So this is a list I'll make, but clearly, like if you could print these slits, even with a printer, and you get a sharp enough line, of course, it'd be really interesting to be able to layer it, where you have a thin layer of slit and then a thicker layer and a thicker layer, 10 layers thick. So see what thickness does to the pattern, and then see what different materials do to the pattern. So using, plastic versus metal, very interesting to see. And then you could charge the plates. You could charge the slits, the two razor blades. You could charge them, put an electric current across them, and see if it changes the pattern. I've just never seen that done. But aren't these all experiments they should have done? They say this is quantum mechanics at its best. They say this is the best way to see quantum mechanics happening. And yet they don't do any of these experiments. And they cite experiments where they never even did them, where they tried to detect and shit. They never even did those experiments. That's what I illustrate in the video, and you people don't pay any attention to. That they're the ones that are doing shit science, garbage science, because they don't even test their own experiment. They don't even play with it and tweak it and mess with it to see what else would happen. They seem to have absolutely no curiosity about their own theory. All right, so I am going to delete these comments. And again, you show up with these icons, this whatever, this racist shit. Fuck you people. Take that someplace else. You want to wear that shit on your sleeve? Then I'm just going to punch you in the face. Yeah, fuck you, Nazi. That's just so fucking rude. All right. Since I have been feeling where this is headed, fuck you, I'll plant this here, whatever the fuck that means. You said how there is supposed to be an electron arrangement for the slits. I said that there's lots of reason to believe that electrons are involved. Everything photons do have something to do with electrons. Electrons and photons go together like poo and a dog's ass. It's just the way it is. Okay, photons just don't have any existence without the electron. Without an electron to hit, photons don't exist in the universe, pretty much, asshole. And that is a fact. Okay, that's how we detect photons, is by having them perturb electrons. That's exactly what a photon detector does, is it has the photons hit electrons and multiply the electron effect, create a voltage. You fuckers. So the argument is, as I've pointed out, is that we know that atoms are covered in electrons. So we know that there's going to be electrons on the surface, and that the electrons could have something to do with creating this change in pattern. The fact that if I had a round and I have a round and I have a round, right? The atom. So this is the surface, round atom, round atom, round atom, round atom. And that's saying the atoms are lined up perfectly straight, which they probably aren't. They're probably staggered. So one would go round here, and then there'd be a round down here, and then there'd be a round up here again, then there'd be a round down here again. Clearly a pattern is on the surface of all material objects. That's what I said, a pattern of electrons. Now, there's lots of mechanisms I could provide you with in terms of how photons would interact with those electrons and whether the photon would be consumed by the electron and a new photon is emitted in a new direction. Lots of ways to explain this to you. My point is, I don't need to do that. The only argument I'm making is they've jumped to the UFO explanation when they haven't even tried at all to make the, axe chop down the cherry tree explanation. That little George did it, that it wasn't a magical giant that came and knocked the cherry tree down. All right. They're going with the magical giant story. And all the evidence is sitting here. The axe is right there. Okay. There's a little callus on George's little finger. It's clear how the cherry tree got knocked down. Asshole. All right. Also, you previously mentioned how electrons respond to a magnet directly. What I said was free electrons. So clearly a bound electron can only move the whole atom, let's say, or do some other kind of potential change. So let's say, I don't think there's too much evidence that you could induce, like the charge argument. I don't know if you could create charge on this plastic pen with a magnet. Now, I haven't tried to do it, to see if I could create any, like if I totally made it neutral. And then I said, let's see if I can put charge onto a pen by just waving a magnet next to it. And it might be possible. So, yeah, I can't. So what I've argued is clearly magnets affect electrons. Clearly in some material more than others, in ways we can see. And maybe you just can't, you have to hit it with too many photons to be able to see if it has charge on it. Charge is a lot of electrons, you could argue. Not a small number of them. It's a lot. Very high voltages, very low current, that kind of thing. Ton of them on the surface. And but anyway, let's not get into it. So photons don't have much chance of creating a lot of charge, but they create some. All right. Meaning that it will either come directly toward or away one of the poles. The electrons clearly are pressurized by magnets. And the question is, certainly on metals, conductors. And I'll say it again. Now, we know that the ones that are fixed in a piece of plastic can hold charge right on the surface in one location. You could charge this in little tiny locations. You could put charge in all kinds of locations. And the other part could be neutral. So I could have positive charge here, and I could have positive charge here, and no charge here, no charge here. I can distribute the charge fairly unevenly. That I can do to an insulator. Because it the electron pressure isn't connected to all the atoms. So it can't move from one atom to another atom to another atom because all the atoms aren't in an arrangement where the electron pressure, the voltage, can move from one atom to another, where in a metal they can. All right. In a conductor, they can. All right. From these points above, wouldn't a magnet influence the electron arrangement? Yes, I think it would. The problem is, how do you get a magnet to create enough of an influence to the electrons to create a change in the pattern? So that's the argument. Can you create enough of a change a change more dramatic than the surface is actually becoming closer and closer. So the argument I'm making is that when you bring the surfaces closer and closer, that effect is stronger than the effect a magnet on the outside can create. But I would argue that it's likely the magnet can create some change. But again, it's not an experiment I've seen done. So it'd be an interesting experiment to see done. And I think ideally you have to use electromagnets that you can turn on and off, because you need to create the field and then remove the field. But then you'd have to be able to detect that frequency change in the pattern. So you'd clearly have to turn it on and off pretty slow so you can see the flicker in the pattern. But I haven't seen the experiment done, attempted. So if you have evidence that it's been attempted and found that magnets can't possibly affect the two-slit experiment, I'd be interested if you have a source. I just don't think anybody's tried to do it. All right, so that takes care of that. I think that's it. So refresh this. Is there anything else on this subject I want to go over? There's just so much to this, and it's just you people are just so obnoxiously so full of shit, and you don't account for any of it. You know, the whole Huygens argument. You know, so Susskind did the video. He never accounted for how the pattern's created. So he gave you nothing as an explanation. And they're nitpicking me about how the electrons affect photons. And we know electrons affect photons in all kinds of ways based on how they're caught in tension. So if I put the electron in strong tension, I'll get one reaction. If I put the electron in weak tension, I get another reaction. So we already know that's a fact. But I'll get harassed. But they don't harass Susskind for giving them nothing. Just absolutely zero explanation for the cause. Just random kick. Random kick. That's all he was willing to say. He didn't do Heisenberg-Huygens. Now, if you do Heisenberg and Huygens, and you're at all honest, then you have to explain how, when you have a single slit, okay, somehow two waves are created. So a single wave goes in, and we get two waves out. Okay, and the two waves interfere with each other. So two waves. Pen stop writing. Two waves. All right, 1 and 2. Okay, 1 and 2. Now, when I have the double slit, somehow I only get two waves again. How come I don't get four waves? How come I don't get two waves in each one of the single slits? All right, so why don't you, one of you assholes, answer one of my questions and explain how Huygens is a viable explanation? Oh, too bad there's just not nearly enough contrast there. All right, so here's the single slit. All right, so there's your opening. The waves come in from the bottom, go in, and two round waves are created, creating the Huygens effect, right? But when it's the double slit experiment, the same Huygens only creates two waves again. Now, even though there's two openings, right? Obviously, two openings, there should be two waves, two little lumpy waves per opening. That's what Huygens should be doing, shouldn't it? Now, why don't one of you assholes explain that inconsistency? How did the photon know, oh, no, you can't do double Huygens? You know, so, yeah, no, just pretend you're not going through a single slit. Don't Huygens. Just do some other kind of thing where you make a hump. Okay, you make a round wave. Even though you're the same single slit, same size slit as it was over here, how come it doesn't create two waves here? Well, the reason why it doesn't do it is because it wouldn't work. You'd have four waves interfering and you wouldn't get the right pattern. So they can't use Huygens consistently between the two experiments. They have to use it inconsistently. They have to change the fucking rules of their cause. Their cause has to change its fundamental nature for their bullshit to work. And you let them get away with that shit. You're not harassing any of these people for an answer to that question, are you? You just don't give a fuck. Your team can have no evidence. They can have preposterous conflicts and paradoxes. This is a paradox, by the way, essentially. How can you have the same principle cause two do completely different things? How does the photon know that this single slit is part of a double slit experiment? How does it know that? I mean, you people are such fucking hypocrites. All right. No, that's enough. Yeah. All right, so we'll go to the crappy chat, which probably has nothing in it. And then we'll just say, fuck you. Yeah. Ah, that's correct. Nothing. Okay. Practical superconductivity. Any thirsts? I don't even know what that means, practical. Clearly, when they get to these low temperature superconductivity, this is getting quite interesting. You know, just in the sense it saves lots of wire anyway. But you know, in some of the gravity nullifying effects, or whatever you want to call them, the magnetic effects are quite interesting in the sense that you can levitate things at certain levels, you know, set quanta levels, and that's all quite interesting. But I don't know if there's anything hugely practical about it. Personally, I don't think I personally will benefit from it in any way whatsoever. Yeah, I really don't think so. Yeah, I really don't think so. So anyway, you know, even when you have superconductivity, you still have to put a lot of electricity into something. You know, the Hadron Collider, yeah, it has great superconducting magnets, but you still have to put a ton of electricity into the damn thing. A ton. So, yes, you're able to do stuff you can't do if it wasn't superconducting, but you're still got to put the energy in to get the effect out. So it's not like it's free energy, which is kind of funny because that tomorrow morning, the CNPS thing or whatever it's called is going to they're going to be talking about some nutter website about free energy shit and all that crap. You know, it's just, I don't know why people waste time with this crap. We sort of know the rules. We can capture pieces of energy, you know, just like we can steal the energy of the moon to send rockets back to Earth, and you can speed up rockets by capturing some of the energy of a planet by orbiting it, slingshotting, and you're capturing a little bit of its momentum. So we can steal energy in places, but you know, the idea that stealing is easy, that's the problem. People thinking that stealing is easy. No, stealing usually revolves around some sort of, there's always a complication to the theft. And you can almost understand that it's never going to be simple because the biological organisms certainly aren't finding any free sources. They have to do the solar thing, or they have to do the thermal vent thing. They always have to do something to, you know, it's kind of a crude way of stealing it, because they can't do the nuclear thing. Okay. And, you know, if cold fusion was simple, you know, a biological organism probably would already have figured out how to do it, you know, that kind of thing. So, I'm not saying that we can't steal a lot of energy. I'm just saying stealing is complicated and that you got to do it carefully because energy just doesn't come in little packages. But this is an interesting subject because I was thinking about lightning, and I was almost thinking of bringing that up tomorrow. So I'll bring it up now for the fun of it. Because I did have some thoughts that this shouldn't be that hard to do, capturing lightning, when I thought about it. So I'm saying all we really need to do is create a very big capacitor, right? So you can take a lot of little capacitors and tie them all together in the right way, and you should be able to charge all those capacitors with a lightning bolt. And all you want to do is make sure you don't burn them up. So there has to be some way to get rid of the excess. But we certainly should be able to charge things. And I was thinking that what if we made a coil out of really thick copper or aluminum? You can make an aluminum coil, make it really thick, like a lightning rod. And instead of making it a straight up coil, a rod, coil it. Okay, so make a coil, a big giant coil out of 1.5 inch thick aluminum. All right, and make it like 50 or 60 or 70 or 90 turns or something. Let's say 100 turns. And then put a gigantically heavy iron, big heavy piece of iron. All right, and so now you wait for lightning. So lightning hits the lightning rod, goes through the coil to the ground, and you have the iron below the coil, and you have little locks. So when it goes up, the little flippers fall down, so the iron can't go down anymore. So once it goes up, it stays up. So you have little flippers, like an elevator has, little safety flippers. So they flip up, but they don't flip down. So they lock. So when the iron thing goes up, so the idea would be the lightning bolt would magnetize the coil like a solenoid and pull the big heavy piece of iron up. And you can imagine if that piece of iron weighed 10, 20 tons, that's a lot of energy bringing it back down again. So once it's up, we could steal gravity, because it's now defeated gravity. So it's created potential energy by lifting the iron, and now we could just let the thing fall slowly, through a flywheel and gain quite a bit of energy out of it. I don't know how much energy. I don't know how much energy it is lifting 20 tons of steel 10 feet, let's say. But it's free. That's the point. And it's simple, incredibly mechanical. Nothing can really go wrong once you've made it, right? So I was thinking that might actually work. Maybe, right? I just don't know. Especially, the Chinese want to get rid of, they make a lot of crappy steel. So, if you get some crappy cast iron from the Chinese, just melted cars and shit, barely even mixed. You don't need good quality shit. You just need crap that's magnetizable. And it'll create the, So I have to make a small demo, right? And then wait for lightning. But I'm thinking, yeah, that could, theoretically, it makes sense to me that you would get enough of the magnetic field created would be substantial enough for a millisecond to lift an awful lot of weight, I think. So anyway, some way of storing lightning. Storing lightning would be a very good idea. Lots of energy in a lightning bolt. If we could grab some of that, that would be a winner. All right, anyway, just one of the thoughts I had. I had another idea. Let's see, what did it have to do with? Oh yeah, trying to use water instead or something cheaper than steel. But yeah, you can only charge the surface of water. So, it'd be too hard to create an insulated, big enough pile of water. So I said, nah, that probably can't work. But I have to think on it. Maybe there's some way to do it. But yeah, it's just this idea of storing electricity. We really should be able to store lightning. Find some way to charge batteries with it. Because all we really have to do is have some system that can turn the, 200,000 volts into 3 volts, to charge a battery. Or to have a battery that's capable of being charged by a much higher voltage for a much shorter period of time. A battery that we can recharge with 10,000 volts, maybe. That's only a 1.5 volt battery. So it's, there's got to be a chemical that'll work or chemistry that'll do that. But the capacitor idea just seems that really should be doable. Because you can charge a capacitor with static charges. You can put very high voltage into a capacitor and some of it will get wasted, but I mean, it will charge the capacitor. So, I mean, it really should be doable, I think. I mean, obviously somebody would be doing it if it's doable, but I just mean it seems like it should be doable. So I just don't have, I am too busy having to argue with assholes. Fiddle around. But it's something I always have it running in the background. Lightning. Always trying to say there's got to be a way to grab that shit. It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of energy, little tiny seconds worth of energy, but it's a lot of energy in seconds. I mean, if you can spread that energy over a day, it's a lot of energy. Anyway, enough said. Pretty sure it's enough. Okay, so there's nothing else in the comments, right? Right. Nope. Okay, so I'll just get the fuck out of here then. And such. I mean, I went through so many points in that Susskind video, and I just can't, the fact that people just can't make the simple concession that they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't distort the evidence and pervert the history and explain it wrong. They should explain, just as I have done, that there's no mystery about this whole diffraction pattern thing. The pattern's been around for 300 years. We've recognized that confining photons, forcing them to interact with matter, causes them to change their direction. And that's all this really is. So again, it's like they've created a whole mystery thing. And all it is just recognizing that when you force the photons to interact with matter, the photons change direction. And that's not a complex thing when you think about it. That's not a huge surprise. That's not a grand, mysterious, wow, why does that happen kind of thing. It's the kind of thing where you say, that's like tripping over a root. You say, yeah, that's what's going to happen. You'll trip over roots. It makes sense that photons don't like surfaces because surfaces are messy. They have stuff sticking out of them, electrons and such. It's plainly reasonable, not surprising. Just like the fact that clocks wouldn't work as well when you move them really fast. It's not like a huge surprise if I told a kid that, well, yeah, if I take this thing and I move it 50,000 miles a second, that it's going to change and get fucked up. And they say, yeah, I get fucked up too. It's not that big a surprise. You don't need Einstein bullshit to understand, oh yeah, clocks get broken when you move them. Jesus. But no, they've turned into a hole. How else can we explain it except with a gigantic 5-headed UFO? What else could possibly explain it except a made-up baby goo-goo story about magical dimensions? Fuckers. Anyway. So enough of you. Yes. Oh, I forgot it's Friday night. Yeah, Friday night's not too popular. Oh, that what's his face? Probably had his Friday night Q&A. Yeah. I'm not much on typing questions, so I couldn't be bothered with that kind of shit. I probably should do a video in front of his video, and I should just articulate some questions and ask you people to type them for me. That might be a good thing to do. So anyway, till the next time and such. Yeah, I guess we're done. There's no comments, so we're done. How many people are watching? Can't tell because this thing's in the way, so I'll move this thing. 12. Yeah, it's usually 12 is about average. Rather pathetic, but it's a pathetic world.